Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, featuring a conversation with composer David Housden about his music for Disney Illusion Island. We've had David on in the past to talk about his music for Thomas Was Alone, and again, a game called Volume. This is very different than that. Disney Illusion Island is a multiplayer platformer, Metroidvania. You can play as one of four characters, Minnie, Mickey, Donald, or Goofy, and it is just a delight. I enjoyed every second I spent with that platformer and look forward to getting 100% in it. It is so much fun. The music is perfectly Disney, with all the twists and turns you expect from this type of, cartoon soundtrack. And oh, so different than what we talked about with David in the past episodes, like I mentioned. Join us on Discord. You can find the link for that down in the show notes. Talk to us about this and other episodes. Find us on YouTube, which is where we are right now, here on YouTube. We don't put music in these episodes, so if you want to hear music from Disney Illusion Island by David Housden, you have to listen to the audio version. And if you can support us financially on Patreon, we'd be grateful. Patreon.com/level. All right, here's David Housden talking about Disney Illusion Island.
Disney's Illusion Island is not only Mickey Mouse, I was going to say it's a Mickey Mouse Metroidvania, or a Mickeyvania as the studio have been taglining it, but it's actually Mickey and friends, so you can play as Donald, Goofy, Minnie, or Mickey. And I guess it's a kind of spiritual successor to those amazing kind of Disney Virgin Interactive games from the 90s on the SNES and Mega Drive, so Castle of Illusion, World of Illusion, Quackshot, which is one of my personal favorite games of all time, probably like the best child to that. Oh yeah, no, honestly, I like that was very much my, like, Mega Drive was my first console growing up, so like I have so much nostalgia kind of attached to those titles. So to be able to work on the new version of that as an adult is like literally just a childhood dream come true. So yeah, but yeah, sorry, the game is it's a 2D platform Metroidvania. There's no combat in it. The emphasis is very much on traversal and the joy of movement, and it's all about kind of enemies, actors, obstacles to be avoided rather than to be engaged with in a traditional kind of Metroidvania sense. Which is amazing if you're anything like me and love stuff like Ori and Hollow Knight, but just fucking suck at it, basically. I think there's a big market of people who really want to enjoy these games and just kind of chill in a kind of absorbing like the beautiful atmosphere and traverse around these great environments and hopefully enjoy the music, but without necessarily having quite such a severe combat and platforming challenge. And that's really what this game does.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful, I love the art. I love how the backgrounds are just reminiscent of the hand-drawn backgrounds from, the 40s, that whole like Looney Tunes and Mickey Mouse era, right? And it's like, I didn't mean to, sorry for saying Looney Tunes Disney, but but
I know what you mean.
Yeah, of course. It's just, I loved that. And, those hand-drawn backgrounds are so simple because they had to hand draw them. And so it really puts the focus on just the movement and the joy of just bouncing around. It's super fun. And the co-op thing too. Like, I love that. I love that it's co-op.
Yeah, you can play with up to 4 people, which is a lot of fun, if slightly chaotic. But a new dimension to the play, and it's a great thing to do with friends and family and stuff.
Definitely. So let's talk about the music, because I got 4 tracks and, wanted to hear more. So I fired up the game, and there's so much cartoon writing, right? Which didn't occur to me as of course, when I listened to the 4 tracks I got, you can tell it's family friendly Disney times. But then you see the way the cinematics unfold in the game, and you're like, oh my God, he's scoring a cartoon, which is really hard to do. So talk to me about writing in that style.
As you very rightly said in the introduction, it's about, well, certainly for me, it's about the most difficult job that I could possibly have been given. I have no experience in writing for that sort of thing, and so much respect and admiration for anyone who does, because it is just so notey and complex and just I don't want to say creatively stifling in terms of the amount of kind of hit points that you have to catch and stuff, but it's not as simple as just kind of, writing a piece and letting it flow in the way that you might like to. You really do have to synchronize and gel with what's happening visually, and you're part of a homogenous kind of like what one affects the other and vice versa, and there's no way around that. So yeah, it was a very, very steep learning curve, if I'm going to be honest with you. The studio, Delilah, are absolutely incredibly bunch of talented folk, and I had the pleasure of working with them on Battletoads.
Yeah.
When was that? A few years ago now, like 2020 maybe. And I guess that for some reason they felt that after writing an 80s hair metal soundtrack, I'd be a good person to ask to do the most kind of convoluted, complex classical cartoon orchestrations that you can imagine. I wasn't going to tell them no, obviously, but there was a lot of work to do. There was a lot of studying to do. Like, I feel as a composer, I have grown more in this development cycle than I probably had in my previous sort of 7 or 8 years. And I had to do so much studying, so much active listening, so much research, because this opportunity was incredible, and I certainly wasn't going to be the one that let the team down. And when you've got these just incredibly talented artists and designers, and everyone's at the absolute top of their game, like I had to produce a score that was worthy of being part of the Disney musical universe, and hopefully we've managed that.
I can think of worse things to have to do a deep dive on.
Yeah, I had to update my Disney Plus subscription for sure, and my partner was absolutely loving, because she's obsessed with Disney. So just having to watch all of these films, and particularly the Mickey shorts, that was a massive reference point. She was absolutely loving all of that. But yeah, we really tried to kind of capture the spirit of because Mickey's gone through so many evolutions over time, and I think this was something that I kind of had to learn for myself, because I always thought Mickey and just what I would associate with general Disney music were kind of synonymous with one another, but there's actually a really big distinction there, and I wasn't aware of this until Disney themselves kind of told me, because my initial explorations were kind of I guess more in the sort of 90s Renaissance, Alan Menken, big sweeping romantic kind of sound. I thought, that's Disney, that will get us in where we need to be, and then we can start to look to play with it after that. But no, they were very kind of quick to point out that Mickey has his roots in ragtime, Tin Pan Alley, because that's music that was popular in the 20s and the 30s when the character was conceived and those cartoons came out. So naturally, that's kind of now become synonymous with him. But what I noticed as I kind of did my research and I was watching all of these shorts and stuff is that there are really no rules anymore when it comes to the music for Mickey. That it tends to be dictated by his environment and the context of the story that he's in. So in terms of the genre of music and the palette of the instrumentation, it can really be anything, and is anything from heavy metal to jazz to kind of EDM in place. If they're trying to do like a funny skit, it really does change like that much. So on that sense, I felt like I kind of had carte blanche to explore what I wanted to. But the thing that connects all of it stylistically is these chromaticisms and accidentals from way back in those kind of early 30s, that Steamboat Willie kind of sound. That's the thing that links it all together. So, and that's what I wasn't doing initially. And like once I kind of absorbed that and took that in, that was really when I feel like we started to find a sweet spot with it. And that's when the voice of the game kind of came through.
Nice. Yeah, I noticed those chromaticisms because everything is so otherwise sunnily diatonic, right? Everything is from whatever key you wrote this in, everything is in there except that, but then you're like, nope, we're going to mix it up a little and put in these sharp fours or whatever it is, and I really loved that because, it gives it a character. And I think too, just to kind of comment on what you're saying about the sound of Mickey, it's like when that was created, all of the music was, used in a modern way then, right? You know what I mean? Like they're referencing popular music from that day in those scores. So it makes total sense that there would be EDM now, because that's a modern reference. You know, it's like this is it's cool how they've done that, you know, how they've maintained that connection to reality in a way, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you know, don't get me wrong, like it's definitely, the majority of it is all still orchestral. It's just, you know, they lean in different directions and they pull it all together in a way that somehow still feels congruent. And the reason that it does is because, you know, harmonically and melodically, they're still using exactly the same devices, regardless of if it's with a Les Paul through a Mesa Boogie stack or, you know, a 60-piece orchestra playing with tons of vibrato and old-fashioned mics. But, you know, it's it's all good stuff.
So is that what it was, a 60-piece orchestra with old-timey mics?
Yeah, so I wanted to be really faithful. Well, as faithful as I can in terms of creating a production aesthetic, because the writing, whilst I definitely, you know, had to do my tips of the hat to where we came from and stuff, I also didn't want to kind of ignore what the audience perception is of a modern Metroidvania 2D platforming experience. So, you know, you've got your Rayman Legends, your Hollow Knights, your Oris, you know, that there's games which are literally renowned for just having incredible soundtracks and, you know, really modern feeling contemporary fantasy scoring. You know, obviously still with the orchestra, but, you know, it feels like it's on the cusp of orchestral scoring rather than dipping into the past. So I think my writing naturally is of a more kind of modern style in terms of like the harmonic and melodic sequences that my ear tends to lean to, just because I was brought up, you know, playing rock and pop music, I guess. And now I've been given an orchestra to work with instead of a few idiots with guitars on the stage with me. So it's, you know, it's like some of those songwriting sensibilities, you know, I'm never going to lose them because they're so ingrained in who I am as a writer. But, you know, your palette changes and your references definitely change an awful lot. So yeah, there's a ton to consider. But yeah, sorry, I meandered now. And
no, not at all.
Talking about the band days in the first 10 minutes. That's good, wasn't it?
So, with the orchestra, did you use certain instruments? How did you use the orchestra? Did you use certain instruments for certain characters, or, you know, in a motivic way? What did you do with the players?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about the orchestra and the production.
Yeah. No worries.
But yeah, sorry. It was a 60-piece ensemble. We recorded with the Nashville Scoring Orchestra at Ocean Way. And
fun! Did you come over for that?
Yeah, I certainly did. Yeah, I had to get my fix of American food and goodness. So, you know,
Nashville's a good place to do it. I haven't been since I was a child, but that'd be a good spot. But go on.
And the music scene there is just absolutely incredible. Like every single night, you know, you're just walking along and there's bands playing, and it's a really cool place. Like I love going there. I recorded there on an earlier project called Lost Words a few years ago, and I had such a good experience there. I just felt really at home, and it was quite intimidating for me at the time because it was my first time working with a live orchestra, but they were just so accommodating, and you know, most importantly, they've all did an incredible job with it. So I felt very safe kind of going back there with this, and the weight of responsibility that came with it. I knew that I could produce the results that I needed to with them, and they were absolutely fantastic. And you know, we spent some time with the engineer and the contractor beforehand to kind of, you know, discuss this past meets present kind of aesthetic that I wanted to try and capture. So the writing is, you know, in places at least, you know, kind of more what you'd expect from contemporary modern scores. However, you know, we've set up, you know, old-fashioned decketry at the front of the orchestra, and we've got some ribbon mics on the outside, and my orchestrator Evan Rogers is just an absolute beast when it comes to, you know, detail, and, you know, he threw himself into those kind of old scores to look for, you know, what the notation was and what the directions were to the players to kind of achieve that sort of classic sound. So even though the writing was, slightly more modern, certainly, in terms of structure and form, more pop sensibility than kind of classical. But we really tried to get like some of these old school techniques in there, so it felt nostalgic yet present. So slight juxtaposition there, I know, but that was basically the goal with what we were trying to achieve. But yes, sorry. In regard to the writing, no, we didn't actually do character themes. I'd say the brief for the game was really to bring this fantasy world to life that they created. So it was all about giving these environments their own distinct personality. And I mean, what I was actually told is that they wanted it to feel like you were walking through Disneyland as you're exploring this world. So how you kind of walk into these very visually distinct different areas in Disneyland as you make your way around the park. That's what they were trying to kind of recreate in the world of Monoth here, and they wanted the music to match with that. So it was really like giving each environment its own distinct kind of theme and personality was really the way we did it. So more Final Fantasy VIII than Final Fantasy VII. That was my touch
nerd.
Guilty.
Well done. So, well, let's just talk about each of these tracks. So, Crescent Hamlet.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, tell me why. So what's happening in the game here? Because this one has a little bit of a slower tempo. So I'm like, maybe we're not platforming here. So talk to me about what's going on.
This was me fulfilling one of my composer bucket list items, which was to write a cozy village sort of fantasy theme for a game, because they're always my favorite pieces of music. And
yes.
I'm a big RPG nerd, if my previous comment didn't quite give that away. And like the peaceful village themes are like 9 times out of 10 end up being my favorite pieces of music in the entire score. So to have sorry, to answer your question, in the game Crescent Hamlet is literally a sleepy kind of seaside town where not a lot happens, and it's a slower pace of life and stuff. So it does provide a bit of a break for, as you rightly assumed, from the slightly more sort of frenetic platforming pace in other areas of the game. So it was just my opportunity to go to town and kind of just stick a big hook in there and get the heartstrings going. So I had great fun with it. And we had Kristen Nigus, a good friend of mine, obviously appears on every game that comes out these days, but she played the low whistle solos and the tin whistle and a myriad of other instruments that I couldn't possibly begin to name. But yeah, she's on there a lot.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the tin whistle, because that pops up a couple different times. I really love that, and I love that that's Kristen.
Yes.
So she plays that then all over, I assume, because Forgotten Farmlands, there's also tin whistle or penny whistle in there that I loved. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the as well as what we were discussing earlier in terms of the kind of the writing techniques that really capture that Mickey sound, so, the chromatics and the Tin Pan Alley sort of harmonic style. There's also tropes in terms of the instrumentation that I felt it was important to lean into to really dial us in. So even though we weren't specifically writing a theme for Mickey per se, it was important that it still felt like a Mickey adventure. So switching in whistles for melody lines rather than cor anglais or oboe or something, which is a very, very easy way to kind of quickly dial yourself into that slightly quirky sort of Mickey sound. And it was interesting to play with a different color as well, because it's not something I'd usually choose to write with. And we actually took it one step further, and so on Forgotten Farmlands in particular, as you mentioned that, I reached out to a guy called Eric Bradley, who he actually provides the official whistle for Mickey Mouse in the cartoons.
Gonna ask, amazing.
So so we had the privilege of being able to work with him it wasn't the color I wanted to overuse, but I think in certain tracks it adds such a nice highlight and really does just kind of tie you into the world of Disney and Mickey in a really interesting way. So that was another very cool little thing that we sprinkled in there.
Yeah, and we're talking about the human whistler, right? The
Sorry,
person
yes,
who's
yes,
actually
yeah.
whistling, which I'm a whistler. I'm not that good of a whistler like that guy, but I mean, and sometimes I just catch myself doing it, and I know not everyone likes it. So you're just like, stop whistling right now. Like my neighbors are probably aiming down the sights or something right now to get me to stop whistling. But I got a big kick out of that because, of course, it reminds me of Jiminy Cricket. I mean, that's like When You Wish Upon
Yeah,
a
oh, yeah, great.
Star,
Yeah,
has the whistling in it. So it's,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
totally a Disney thing. And
And
I
the
loved
Steamboat
it.
Willie original cartoon,
Yes.
that's his thing, isn't it? So yeah, no, absolutely. But
Yeah.
as you rightly said, it's also why I didn't want it to be on every track. Just
Yeah.
too much of a good thing and all that.
Yeah.
So
I was trying to do the octaves. Like I was like trying to do the octaves like he does.
oh,
Boop,
nice, yeah.
boop, 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 boop. And I was just like, well, for one thing, my range is weird. My whistling range is weird, and it's whatever. We can talk
Oh,
about that
right, yeah.
another time. But yeah, so
No, his
it's,
ability was very kind to my writing because it wasn't, as you rightly just pointed out, it wasn't a very kind melody to give someone to try and whistle. And I obviously you're sitting. This is the curse of the composer. You're sitting at home. You're doing everything on your MIDI
right.
keyboard. Unless you have some actual knowledge of the instrument that you're writing for. Often some things tend to get lost in translation when it comes to putting it out onto the stage as opposed to how it sounded on your computer and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
but no, he was just that good that he made the writing sound good, so it's fine.
Amazing. Yeah, I loved it. That's also Forgotten Farmlands is the track that you turn into a
That's
waltz
right.
at some point, which I loved.
Oh, that was so much fun. So much fun. Yeah, yeah. That was like the first track that I wrote for the game. That's why it's got all of these kind of quite stylistically different sections in it because I was essentially trying to summarize in one piece my vision for what the game was going to sound like, I suppose. So I throwing all of these different ideas in there, and it ended up being this really kind of eclectic mix of 3 or 4 different styles of orchestral writing, I suppose. But hopefully it threaded together okay. Well, it got me the job at the end of the day, so it must have been fine. But yeah, that was like the first piece that I wrote. So
Oh wow.
and it's one of the first things that you hear in the game as well. So I do have a big soft spot for that piece for many reasons.
Yeah, yeah. And then Grazar's workshop, right?
Uh,
I assume it's Grazar.
that's right. Yeah,
Loved the woodblock, which you hear in other tracks too. That's such a
yes, that's a
cartoon.
repairing device. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But also just kind of has this impish, devilish kind of mood to it. So, which is fun. So, talk to me about that track.
definitely. But that was, I think, the last track that I wrote for the game. It's certainly for the
Oh,
last area in the game. It's possible that the boss theme came after that, but it was one of the last tracks I wrote for it. So I feel like I'd started to find my feet a bit more by then, and I was able to this piece definitely came a lot easier to me than some of the others did. I feel like I was nicely in the zone then, so I'm really proud of it on a personal level. But yeah, also I really like it because it's just darker than the rest of the score. And after writing so much happy music in a major key, it was nice to just go on the darker side a little bit. And it was kind of, it's still obviously playful, like not literally trying to scare people, but it's just more kind of Haunted Mansion, Casper, Danny Elfman sort of style,
yep.
the darkness, I suppose, rather than actual horror scoring. So, but no, it was such great fun to just write in a minor key, and yeah, just sort of explore some of that slightly darker side of Disney while still trying to keep it fun and family friendly and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, major key is not the easiest for most composers. I think most composers, maybe not most, but I've certainly talked to my fair share of composers who are
Yeah.
like, ugh, major. Like, like it's
Who
so
wants to make
hard
people feel
to be
happy? Come on.
happy all the time. It's, and I think part of the reason is because as opposed to there being, dozens upon dozens of types of minor scales, there's literally one major scale. So I think that might make it hard too, but I'd love to hear your thoughts
Yeah,
on what it
it's
was like to do this
no, you're right.
happy thing.
It's seen as, I guess low hanging fruit or I don't know, easy, overly childish, perhaps, to have an entire score in that style, which is why I personally found it so refreshing to see Grant Kirkhope and Gareth Coker's music for Rabbids recognised rightly by so many award bodies this year, because normally, regardless of the quality of the writing or how well it lends itself to the experience, I don't know if I call it like snobbery, but it does feel like if you write music which would be perceived as being for a slightly, younger crowd or less mature crowd, then it's assumed that the music itself must therefore be, kind of easy or overly accessible or obvious, perhaps. But there's some incredibly complex writing in that score, and
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me, because I tend to be far more minimalist in my writing. I try and convey as much emotion as I can without overcomplicating the message, because I feel like that's the most effective way to communicate with people most of the time. But if you're writing for a project or an intellectual property which has its roots in a particular style of music, and that happens to be a very complex style of music, then you'd be stupid to ignore that. So it was a really interesting challenge for me, and like it is, like you say, major writing in a major key on the face of it perhaps isn't as interesting or challenging as writing for minors, because of the different variations that you have there. However, like the amount of modulating that we do in this score, and the because of the Timpan Alley influence being so strong, like it is major key, but you do so many interesting things within that. Like
Of course.
I was constantly being kept on my toes when I was doing like the active listening for the project at the beginning, to dial my ear into what are the key characteristics of this style of music. Like what do the best people who've written in this genre, like what did they do to kind of capture what they did? Like I had pages and pages and pages of notes, because it just changes so much. Like you start off in one place, you end up in another, and then you revisit. It's constantly adapting and evolving, and yeah, there was never a dull day on the job. I can assure you. I'm quite looking forward to just not having to key change or do anything for a while.
Right. Yeah, and I think I may have misspoke that question, because I meant to imply that major is really hard. I think
Oh,
major,
right, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so. I apologize for maybe
Oh, no,
sounding
not at
the
all. No,
opposite, but yeah, I
it's
think
me
major
getting it wrong.
major
Yeah.
music is a huge challenge, because I think
Tough to
you
make it
know
compelling, right?
yeah, you have to make it compelling, and not everybody is happy all the time, and you have to
No,
write happy music. I mean, I think it's hard. I think it's
no.
really,
And good
really
music does have
challenging.
light and shade in it. To me, like
Yes.
our ears are
Yeah.
naturally attracted to contrast in music, be that through the use of the contrast of major and minor in our harmonic sequences, or be it our use of palette or color. Like our ears are attracted to change, so having to kind of, as a prerequisite, like stay in one particular zone and not really being able to touch too much into that other side of emotions, it does present challenges. But I always find that constraints breed creativity more often than not, and if you actually have some parameters, and that can be incredibly inspiring in terms of how you look to still write compelling music within this box. And I mean, Thomas Was Alone was really a great example of that, because I had like nothing. I had like a 2-octave MIDI keyboard and one set of VST, so I had to make a score with that stuff because I don't have anything else. And then you
Right.
find different ways of trying to be creative within that. So in Illusion Island, like obviously, save for the areas where we were allowed to kind of go darker, such as the boss encounters and Grey Star's workshop, as you pointed out, the rest of it is really kind of I had to reflect the landscape and the environment that the artists had created, and it was a beautiful, happy, fun cartoon world. So how can I then be interesting within that? And that was super interesting for me.
Yeah, we'll come back to this. We'll talk about the title track, main theme situation here in just a moment. But you mentioned early on and this conversation, and also when we spoke in 2015. I just feel awful about that. It's not right.
We won't let it go another 8 years. I can assure you of that.
That's for sure. That you're a guitar guy, and your background is bands and punk and pop, and I know you love prog rock and stuff like that, I think. So how does that influence the way you write? Because I think you mentioned that you write on a keyboard. Do you ever write on guitar?
Honestly, Emily, very rarely these days. I think that's why Battered Toes was such a fun project for me, because it enabled me to actually go back and revisit my comfort zone and really kind of dial in on what I was what I was best at. I'm certainly a better guitarist than I am a pianist, although I wouldn't particularly want to have to perform in public on either, but
definitely
I certainly know where I am with a guitar more. I can say that with absolute confidence. So so being tasked with an entire score, which is essentially crazy 80s hair metal, is a super fun excuse to get the Les Paul out and have some fun again. But no, otherwise it does tend to be all on keyboards. In my most of my other work, I find a way to work some guitar in there, as you sort of rightly picked up on. I'm a huge sort of post-rock fan, and I think one of the things that tends to thread some of my scores together, even though they tend to be very different from one another because of the genre that I get asked to write in, changing on almost every time. But having some of that sort of post-rock influence in there is a recurring device that I lean on, just because it is probably my favorite genre of music. I think it's some of the most beautiful and emotional music anyway. And in particular, there's a band called Hammock that I absolutely adore, and I just think they're the best. But for my personal taste, they're certainly my favorite band. And I always think if I can write something half as beautiful as they do in their music, then I'll have done a very good job on a project. So I do try and sneak that kind of thing in, but obviously wasn't going to be appropriate this time around, unfortunately. But no, I'm looking forward to my next excuse to do something on guitar. It would be nice if it happened more often, really. But it's weird. Like I whatever the opposite of typecasting is, seems to be how my career is going. Every single project is so vastly different from the next one. It's a really fun way of working. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked back in the day, we talked about volume, and Thomas Was Alone, and those two scores are so different from each other, right?
Right? Yeah.
So different. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a full-size keyboard for volume, so that helps. But
made a difference. And I mean, I know it's, speaking of low-hanging fruit, it might be kind of an easy throwaway question to be like, what's changed since 2015? But, I think there's value in talking about that. How the landscape has changed for you as a composer since 2015. What's that been like?
Well, significantly, really. I feel like I was quite privileged to enter the industry when I did, because it was still the back end of the indie boom at the time, and if you could get your game on Steam, it basically meant that you'd been a financial success, and certainly you get enough eyeballs on it that if it was a good game, you'd probably get critical success as well. And very fortunate that Thomas Was Alone enjoyed critical acclaim, and it sold very well, purely by being on Steam, because it was a closed platform place at the time. But even in the development cycle, after, so I think Thompson's Loan was 2012 or 2013 perhaps, and then Volume was 2015, and even in those few short years, like Volume still sold a ton of units and it did very well financially, but the marketplace was so much more saturated then. We didn't get anywhere near the same level of sort of press attention for that. And obviously it was a different game as well. So I'm not for a second sort of suggesting that it was, on the same level as Thomas was Alone, but I was surprised at how much less the coverage was, relatively speaking, even in that kind of short period of time. And then things have only continued to become more saturated since then with Steam green light system and multiple other marketplaces opening up. It depends how you look at it, really. I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, so I just think more opportunity, and also the more games that come out, like they're not all going to have great music. So if you can still find a way to cut through the noise and to do your best work that you're capable of every single time, people are going to notice, because not all games do have awesome soundtracks, and just like film and TV in that respect. But a marketplace being saturated inevitably means that more people are coming through, and that the quality level isn't going to be as high as when when I was first getting into it, there was like maybe 10 or 12 guys and girls who would get the biggest and the best gigs every single year, and that hasn't really changed too much. If you look at the kind of core of AAA composers, there's probably maybe 15 recurring names that you see, if that, frankly. People like to stick to what they know at a certain level, and I feel like the more experience that I've built up over the years, the more trust that I've been given, each project that I work on is a larger one in terms of kind of finances and scope than the previous one. So I'm not, obviously not working on AAA titles at the moment, but certainly they're not indie games anymore either. You're working with teams of 40 plus people and incredibly large IPs, and the weight of responsibility that comes with that is obviously massively increased as well. And you can't just go about your life in the same way that you would when you were working on indie games for one person in their bedroom. But it's nice, it was the dream to be able to obviously hear your music brought to life by the most talented players in the world. It's an incredible feeling, and certainly not something that's ever going to get old for me. It's nice that things have developed the way that they have, but also I can definitely kind of recognize and appreciate that the industry is probably as hard to get into now as it ever has been, but at the same time there is a hell of a lot more opportunity than there was when I was starting out. So swings and roundabouts, perhaps.
And what have you been playing lately? What games did you play? Tears of the Kingdom? Did you what have you what have you been playing?
I wish honestly that fell at what we call crunch time. So there's no chance whatsoever that I could sack off 100 hours of my life at that point, unfortunately. And then what's like, news cycles pass, and then I kind of skipped over it. And so at the moment I've actually been playing I'm a massive kind of horror fan, so the new Project Zero game, or Fatal Frame as it will be called in the US, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is what I've been playing recently. I think I needed something else after 3 years of Disney and and stuff. Give me the most terrifying game on the market at the moment. So that's what I've been playing recently. And then before that, obviously Illusion Island, I wanted to 100% because I hadn't played it in a very long time since kind of development, and even then it was earlier version of the game. So so that was super fun to see it come to life. And also I feel like you hear things differently when you kind of experience it in context. It's almost it's almost like on the same level as when you hear a piece of music go from being a demo to something which is brought to life by an orchestra or by a live band or something. It completely changes the way that you hear the music, and I felt like that when I experienced it kind of with the game, playing it at home as well. So that was a really nice experience. but yeah, other than that, old school games. To be honest, Emily, like I've
Yeah.
been on my I've been on my retro trail since I had to
Nice.
play all these games for research and stuff, and then I just turned into a bit of a kind of Mega Drive collector and hoarder. So I've got like 60 Sega games now that I just got massively into and play for fun. But it also means I
Yes.
have a massive backlog of games which have actually been made this year that I should
Hmm.
work for at some point. But how about you? Have
Yeah.
you been playing cool lately?
I've been Zelda-ing, and then I've been very addicted to Oxenfree and Oxenfree 2 since Oxenfree
Oh, I
2
saw the
just
second
came
one came
out.
out a while ago.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I just interviewed Andy about both of those
Oh,
yesterday.
amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, I love those games so much. So I've been playing a lot of those the last few weeks.
Awesome.
And then I do dabble with Destiny still. I have ever since it came out. I've kind of had a love hate, on again, off again relationship with that game. Um, but I'm intrigued by Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes, me
That
too.
is a
That'll be my Christmas game this year.
possibility, but also Armored Core is coming out, and I've never played an Armored Core game, but I guess this
Oh, I
one
know.
is amazing. So that comes out at the end of the month on like the 25th, I
Oh,
think,
okay.
or something like that. So,
Yeah.
and I just did. I mean, I don't know if you played Elden Ring, but I just
Oh,
lost so much
love
of my life.
Elden Ring. Yeah. I had like
Years.
I think 140 hours on it.
Oh
When it,
man, yeah, at
and I
least.
literally did everything, every single boss. Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't. I
That
got
was a good
stuck at
time.
one point, and then by that point, I was on to something else and didn't go back to it. So I feel like if I went back to it now, I'd have to start over. I just wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But yeah, I loved that game, and you know
So
they're
great.
the Armored Core, that it's from Software. So I'm just interested to
Oh,
see.
really? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
So
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. We'll see if I pick that up on launch day. I don't know, but yeah, it's, oh man, yeah, I don't know. And now
Really?
Disney.
It's too much.
Now I'm going to play Illusion Island, of course, because I loved it. And
Oh, amazing. I'm glad you had fun.
yeah, I mean, I love a low stakes
Yeah.
low
No, no,
stakes
no.
platformer. You know, I mean, because it's adorable.
It
The
was made to be
animations are great.
accessible. It's literally one of the selling points. So it's
Exactly.
not even,
Yep, and I want to collect, like, the first time I found a hidden area, I'm like, well, I'm hooked. I want to find all the hidden areas and all the cards and all the
yeah,
memorabilia, all the things.
yeah.
So, yeah, I love it. I love it.
No, me too. Yeah, I had to get them all.
Yep. And then, well, let's go ahead and talk about that main theme then. You know, just beautiful, sweeping melody and very uplifting, and I love how it starts. Is that Celesta at the beginning?
That's right. Yeah, but
Yep, love it.
I was a real philistine about it and just stuck a delay over it, so it sounds a bit spacey and weird,
That's
rather
great.
than sort of classical. But yeah, no, I just felt, well, how better to set the tone of a start of a magical journey than with a bit of Celeste. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a beautiful instrument. And, you know, you mentioned that I think you said Forgotten Farmlands was the first track you wrote. When did
Yes.
the
Yeah.
main theme come around? How did that, or, you know, the title screen thing, you know, however you want to frame it?
Um, I I've just realised that I lied about Forgotten Farmlands because this definitely did come first. So that
Oh,
wasn't the. It
well, we're
might have been.
correcting it
It
now.
might have been. I know it might have been the first piece that I submitted to Disney. I think maybe that's why I got
Ah,
confused because we had
oh, okay.
I had this theme and it wasn't fun and cartoony. It was kind of big and emotional and magical. And I just felt like for the kind of scale of the adventure that I knew Delilah were aiming to create, it needed a big theme. And I just thought how nice it would be just to have like a really kind of strong classic kind of 90s sounding
Yeah.
adventure theme to kick the game off, and then we can go kind of fun and cartoony and lighten the tone and what have you. But so yeah, we thought it was wise that we didn't like. So everyone at the studio really liked it, but we were obviously collaborating with Disney as partners for the first time. So it was really important that they trusted and felt confident with what I was producing as well. So I thought it would probably behoove us not to lead with the thing which is pushing the boundaries of the brief, and maybe go with something a bit safer, which is when I wrote Forgotten Farmlands as a please trust me that I won't mess this game up for you kind of pitch. And once I got my foot in the door with that, then we sort of, I think we probably submitted one or two other tracks after that. So I would definitely remember The Library was another very early piece that I wrote, and Deep Roots, I think they were the first three that we submitted. And once we kind of built up that trust and relationship, then we had a bit more confidence to be like, what do you think about this as a theme? And then full credit to them, they were, you know, very, very kind and open-minded to, you know, consider something a bit different. I'm really glad they did though, because it does just set things up really nicely, and it's a bit different to the rest of the score, but I really like it.
Yeah, I like it too. Tell me about a soundtrack. Are you getting a soundtrack release?
Yes, it's actually being released on via Walt Disney Music, which is absolutely insane. So, yeah, no, that was super exciting, because I don't think Disney Interactive, certainly for a period of time, really did soundtrack releases alongside the game. So it was very flattering that they felt strongly enough about the material to want to actually kind of put it out as an official release. So yeah, I think that's available on all digital spaces now, and potentially vinyl down the line, but we'll see.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, well, it would be cool to have for the wall. So,
but it's out there now on you know the places, Spotify, Bandcamp.
All the big ones, yeah.
Okay, is it on Bandcamp?
No, Bandcamp, but Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Oh, that's such good news.
Yeah.
Well, what more do you want to say about the experience? I mean, what other types of directions were you able to go musically?
Well, all sorts, to be honest. It's quite a varied score in places. I'd say there's probably three main musical areas that we keep coming back to. So you've got your stuff like Forgotten Farmlands and The Library, which is, you know, very much about just capturing the beauty of the environment and the sense of joy that we want the player to feel whilst traversing through it. Really dialing us into that kind of classic cartoon, old school sound. Then I'd say the next main factor is which is as close to combat music as we go, but the boss fights, so the boss themes, we've got these really big bombastic arrangements for those where we pick the pace up and go much kind of heavier with the orchestrations, and they're a lot of fun to do. They're probably the hardest pieces for me, just because there's so many. It's just so notey. You're writing at such a quick tempo to kind of keep the pace of the action going. It just requires sort of 3 tracks worth of ideas just to fill one piece of music, and I found those very challenging but very rewarding when you come to the end of them. And to hear live was just the most fun thing in the world. We recorded all in the room together rather than stemming out, because we wanted it to, you know, have that authentic sound, as I mentioned earlier. So hearing them all together, you didn't have to use any imagination at all. You know, you were just getting that larger than life sound at the time, and it was that was very, very cool. And then the third element that goes into it is so Gradesar's Workshop would be one example of the kind of sort of slightly darker style, still very, very playful, but you know, more we use a minor key, as we mentioned beforehand. And there's other tracks like Deep Roots and Service Tunnels, you know, and they all have these kind of, you know, sneaky kind of haunted house type vibe to them, which was a ton of fun to do, because, you know, I just love all things kind of Halloween and horror and stuff. So it was really nice to tap into that type of thing. So I'd say they're the kind of 3 core elements of the game, musically speaking. And then, you know, there's obviously tracks which sort of balance between all of them, and some are a little bit more in one direction than another, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty varied score throughout, but I'd say they're the main kind of corner points that we come back to more often than not.
Have you ever scored a horror game?
I'm scoring my first one as we speak at the moment.
Really?
Yeah. Finally got one.
Are you happy about that? Like, it's called what?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's called Death Ground. It's a
Oh, the vampire, the dinosaur one.
dinosaur. Yeah.
Shut up! Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's with the guys who did Cube 2 that I worked on.
Oh, okay.
They very kindly brought me back for that as they knew how much of a horror obsessive I am. So,
I love it.
um, yeah, so much fun and such a nice palate cleanser as well. For if you get
Mm-hmm.
a bit Disneyed out, you could just go and
Right.
write to some raptors tearing someone up, and then
Yeah.
and then vice versa as well. When you start to get a bit too gored out, you can go back and
Yep.
nice, yeah.
When does it come out? Death Ground, right? Yeah.
I'm not sure to be. It's probably going to be 2024.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not immediately because we're still very much in development
Okay.
currently, but
Okay.
yeah, sometime next year I would have thought.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's our excuse for next time
Yeah,
to have a
absolutely.
chat.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, what else are you working on? Other stuff that you can talk about, or are you just
Yeah,
holding
I mean,
secrets
it's
right
a good.
now? Okay.
No, it's a good time to chat to me because I'm like basically at the end of all of my kind of everything that I've been working on for the past 3 years is now kind of at a point where it's all been
Nice.
announced and I can actually talk about it. So it's
Okay.
quite a rare moment.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so the other main thing that I've been working on is a game called Lunar Abyss, which is a dark narrative driven sort of sci-fi. Um, it is a FPS, but it has a lot of platforming elements to it, a lot of puzzle solving, and a really strong kind of narrative focus. It's
Mm.
quite sort of I'd say the main influences on it were Black Mirror, the TV show, and
Mm.
sort of some certain like quite dark animes like Blame, and it's got a really striking art style. So that was a ton of fun to write for. It was
Nice.
also my first time ever working with choir.
Oh, cool.
We wanted to have this kind of gothic, almost sort of Gregorian element to the
Nice.
music. So even though you've got like these quite, sci-fi, so in a way it feels futuristic, but it also feels kind of very organic and with its roots in history at the same time. So again, I guess similar conceptually to what I was trying to achieve with Illusion Island, we've kind of got this nice contrast of past meets present with it. So we've got this sort of choral element, which is really nice, but then we also kind of experimenting with cool synth sounds and all that good stuff that I love. So yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's going to be coming out next year as well.
And you said you worked on the Illusion Island for about 3 years, so that was like pandemic
Yeah. I think it
times.
was
Yeah.
2020 when I was first brought onto that. So
Okay.
yeah, it's been a long time in the
Yeah.
works. Yeah,
Yeah.
took me that long to learn how to write it. So
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I
oh,
can't
thank
wait
you,
to get
Emma.
back to the game. Was loving it. I'm gonna try and finagle some of my other Switch friends into getting it so I can do
Yes,
the co-op stuff because it just
love that.
seems great, and what I've played so far has been enjoyable, and the music's
Amazing.
great. So thanks
Oh,
so
you're very
much.
kind. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really great to chat with you again, David.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Is there anything else you want to say before I hit stop?
No, I think that's everything. I don't want to bore people, so I think we've hit
Come
all of that.
on. That's
We've
why
hit
they're
all of
here.
the. No, not at all. No, I think that's great.
Cool.
The only other thing that I was going to say is that I had to do I had to do like a couple of research trips to Disneyland when I was making the game, and that
Disneyland or Disney World? Did you go to Disneyland?
oh no, I know. So it's like Paris is like the closest one to
Oh,
me
Euro
here.
Disney
That's right, yeah. But I did go to the one in California as well when I was over for
land.
the
Yep. Mm-hmm.
23 conference. So that was amazing. But yeah, what was really interesting is it's almost like interactive music in real life, the way that they set things up in the park. So I knew
Yeah.
that visually they were massively at the studio were massively influenced by the Disneyland design, and like those maps and books were actually used as kind of study text for them when they were designing the world of Monarch. But what I didn't realize is just how similar the way the music works is to video game design as well. Mm-hmm. So my brief was obviously to make it feel like you were walking around Disneyland. So I took it upon myself to walk around Disneyland to see what that felt like. But it was really interesting because I noticed that the way that one track just sort of seamlessly bleeds into another as you make your way through the different areas. It's exactly the same way as I would have looked to set it up in a game, although obviously here it's achieved via speaker proximity to the respective area rather than cross-fading multiple layers together in Ys to achieve an effect. But it's very much the same principles at hand. And that was like fascinating to me, just seeing these kind of design principles cross over. So I actually took a lot from that into the implementation of the music in the game as well, which was
cool,
super fun. But yeah, story for another day.
Did you do much implementation, or did an audio team do that?
Oh, so yeah, I don't want to misrepresent the level of my involvement. In terms of physically plugging in music into the game, that's never something that I do because I don't want to break anything. But in terms of actually kind of designing the music system and conceptualizing how things should perform in real time, that's 100%. That's on me. And normally I'll collaborate with either the sound designer or the audio programmer on the team in terms of how to achieve what I would consider to be the perfect vision for it, and then we go from there really, and then it's just an iterative process of going back and forth and play testing once things are in there until you get it feeling just how you want it to. So it's definitely a team effort.
Yeah. And what do you think about the, soundtrack creation process? I love to hear what composers think of that, because it's a completely different way than what your music was supposed to be for, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, for me, it's actually super easy because I would say I probably tend to write the soundtrack arrangement first and then have to figure out how to get that to work in the game.
Oh, okay.
Rather than vice versa. So I can completely understand how another composer would probably find this aspect of it a little bit frustrating if you'd compose literally with the system in mind. But I never do that. I always write the piece of music that I feel needs to represent the emotion or what we want the player to be feeling at that given time, and then I sort of retrospectively figure out how I can make it work within the parameters that we set up for the music system. So when it comes to doing soundtrack arrangements, it's normally just a case of picking what I originally wrote and slapping it on there. But I'm also very conscious of kind of listeners' interest and attention span, and I feel like an album should be, something in the region of 60 minutes, and I don't really think many people want to be hearing a sort of 7 or 8 minute track. So I normally try to make sure that my arrangements are no longer than 3 to 4 minutes max. I try to make it as palatable and as album-like as possible, really. It's what I would expect if I was buying an album. And that's essentially what we're creating here. So I try not to be too self-indulgent with it. And, the phrase "kill your darlings" is something which I definitely apply a lot of in my work. I don't think it pays to be too attached to what you do. You should always try and think about the music from someone else's perspective and how they'd be feeling listening to it, rather than fulfilling your own creative desires.
For sure. Well, David, always a pleasure, and I'm so glad that and it's not like there were projects in the past that we didn't discuss, but I'm looking forward to the new ones coming up. And
yes, definitely.
Maybe I'll dig up some of those older ones too in future conversations, and we can
that would be great.
Do some piggybacking.
No, for sure. But we should definitely chat about Death Ground if nothing else.
Oh my god! I saw a little clip of play and I was just like, nope.
That's what we were going for. So good.
Oh,
mission
good.
accomplished.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
But we'll talk about it. I look forward to it. Thanks so much, David.
Oh, thanks for having me.